Brown 607. Moderator, your predecessor in his closing address spoke passionately about all those things that point to the work that we as a church still have to do. From food banks to bigotry and hate speech, to drugs and rough sleepers and asylum seekers, to the pollution of this planet entrusted to our care, and the violence that makes women feel unsafe, that sends rockets and missiles to maim and kill ordinary people who simply want to live. All of these things, so long as they exist, we were told, remind us as a church that we still have work to do. The then moderator went on to say that while it's not about numbers, we do need the people in order to address these issues and to help turn the world around. I would suggest that it is engagement in just such Jesus manifesto issues that discipleship blooms. It is when we get out from behind closed doors. It is when we are propelled out of what is safe to engage with those who are the same as us but different. And when we face too the challenges the planet faces, that we are reinvigorated and discover others ready to catch that vision. Since the Faith Impact Forum report was submitted and my speech recorded, the world has not stopped or paused from trauma or trouble. People continue to suffer. Conflicts continue to rage. Earth continues to groan. And Jesus says, "Who shall go for me? Who will take the good news to the poor? Who is ready to see the oppressed freed? Who will fight for justice, for people, and for the whole of creation?" Moderator, I present the report and move the deliverance.
Seconded. Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. We now come to questions. If people wish to register a question, you press your button and I call on the Very Reverend Russell Barr.
Moderator Russell Barr, number 2. With regard to section 6.1 of the report and its reference to the Columba Agreement, I'd be grateful if the convener could indicate to the Assembly the issues in which the Forum hopes to engage with our friends and colleagues in the Church of England.
I can answer that by saying we're already engaging with our colleagues in the Church of England, and tomorrow David Bradwell will meet with Malcolm Brown, who's head of Mission and Public Affairs for the Church of England. We engage in lots of public issues with the Church of England and with JPIT, the Joint Public Issues Team. We've looked at immigration together. We've looked at the aid cut already together. We're looking to look at constitutional change questions together. But we also look forward to working with the contact group because we haven't had any contact. Perhaps we could sit down with Russell as convener in the not too distant future and talk things through.
Thank you very much. I now wish to call one of the youth representatives, Fiona Reid.
Thank you, Moderator. Fiona Reid, 760. I would like to thank them for their work on disinvestment at a national level, and I would like to ask, are any shares in fossil fuels still hittable or predatory level around the country? And if so, what would the Forum say to these groups to encourage them to disinvest as well? Thank you.
I think I caught most of that question. Talking about investments of local congregations and presbyteries. I'm not sure the Faith Impact Forum holds all of that information, but I'm sure if the feelings of the Assembly are that we should disinvest as a church nationally, that will permeate its way down throughout the church at every level, so that we look at our engagement, financial engagements, and take seriously our commitment to the planet.
Thank you. It would appear I've got 2 requests with no names against them. I just wonder if anyone can... There's no... If people want to ask a question, would you please try again and press your button, because it would appear that perhaps 2 have not actually come up. So anyone wishing to ask a question, please do so. doesn't appear to be. But obviously, a reminder that we can take questions at any time, so if it's a relevant part in your... if there's a relevant part... I've got two more have now appeared. Graham Beebe, please, Graham.
Thank you, Moderator. BB 412. Moderator, I'd like to ask the convener concerning Section 6, the speaking truth to power. As the convener has said, things move on, time moves on, but we've all been keenly aware that within Scotland, we've seen figures in this past year deeply concerning around the drug crisis in our nation, and obviously the poverty attainment gap. And I'm wondering if the convener can tell us, I've read through the report, I perhaps missed it, but is the Faith Impact Forum engaging in any conversations with the government, the Scottish Government, around these issues?
The short answer is yes. If you've read the report, you will notice reference to Reset the Debt, which is a campaign that we are part of, along with the Joint Public Issues team, where we are calling on the government to take seriously the increase in debt that people have experienced, particularly through COVID, and to look at giving a jubilee for that debt, when it comes to that debt. I think constantly I'm looking around to David, but constantly we are engaging with members of Parliament, with the Scottish Government on lots of issues around poverty. And you can be assured that that is very high on our agenda and will continue to be so.
Thank you. I can now call Mike Goss, please.
Thank you, Moderator. 491, Mike Goss. Moderator, my question relates to section 15 in the report. My friend and fellow Commissioner, Pauline Steenbergen, wanted to ask this, but is unable to be present at this time. I'm pleased and privileged to be able to ask this on her behalf. And not just on Pauline's behalf, but on behalf of many women in our congregations who are survivors of violence and abuse, or working or living in situations which are a threat to their mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical health right now, this second. This question is on behalf of them, their loved ones, families, friends and children. Section 15 says, urge Kirk Sessions to take part in the basic training provided by Integrity, the Church of Scotland's Violence Against Women Task Group. Is urge enough? Why not instruct? Why is it not seen to be central to our culture that every minister and elder is informed and aware and trauma sensitive? Why is it not an instruction that our churches use their voices and power to speak up, campaign, and bring an end to all forms of violence against women? We spend so much time on safeguarding children, young people, and vulnerable adults, and rightly so. Those of you who know Pauline know how much it matters to her that we make our denominational culture, spaces, churches and parishes safer from controlling behaviours, violence and abuse of power. And I stand with that personally as well. For those who have been abused as children, if we survive into adulthood, then we grow up and we are still living with that trauma day in and day out. Throughout the challenges of living with trauma in adulthood, we need to hear our church that sings, "Let us build a house where all may safely live," also commit itself to do everything possible to make that song a lived experience at General Assembly level, Presbytery level, and Kirk Session level. The fourth mark in the much spoken of 5 marks of mission is to seek to transform unjust structures of society, to challenge violence of every kind, and to pursue peace and reconciliation. To quote the former moderator, there's still work to be done. Yesterday, a commissioner enabled a decision to be made on the Theological Forum report to make a video resource to educate all in the Kirk about the Westminster Confession of Faith. If yesterday we did that, then perhaps today we can look at the wording of this particular deliverance. Should section 15 say urge or instruct? Which word has the most impact? Convener, could we ask that? How much do the bodies, minds and spirits of women matter in our church today? Thank you, Moderator.
Convener.
Moderator, I'm grateful to Mr Goss for raising this issue because it highlights what may have easily slipped by the Assembly, the importance of engaging with the issue of violence against women. And if you look at the statistics for this last year, that violence against women has risen drastically because of COVID. We take incredibly seriously this issue, and we are also rolling out a training to raise awareness of it. Now, the Faith Impact Forum staff were the guinea pigs for the training, and I can tell you it is superb. It will be of great benefit as a resource to every congregation throughout Scotland. It is incredibly important that every congregation engages with this matter. My concern over changing urge into instruct is simply that congregations have an awful lot on their plate just now, and that is not an excuse. I think, as I have just said, that it is incredibly important that this matter is looked at and taken seriously and given the time and the attention that it needs. But I'm also aware of how do we roll out the resources to engage with absolutely every congregation in a very short space of time. I want congregations desperately. I want congregations to engage with the issue of violence against women. But I don't want to get people's backs up. And sometimes the word instruct has the opposite effect from the word urge. I seriously urge, and I don't want to see a backlash against instruct. But thank you for raising it and making sure that it does not slip past on the fast track. Thank you.
Thank you. Call David McLachlan from Glasgow, please.
Thank you, Moderator. David McLaughlin, 302. My question relates to section 4.5 of the report, the paragraph about Myanmar. It refers to letters having been sent by the Moderator to the Foreign Secretary and the Myanmar Ambassador. And my question is to ask, have we had any response to the letters? And if so, could the convener give the gist of what the response was?
Thank you. I'll just double check. Did we get a response?
Yeah.
Just, if you give me just a moment just to double check with the Asia Secretary, because it was through Sandy's offices that we made contact. Can we come back to that, Moderator? Is that possible?
Indeed, we can come back.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
can I
David.
ask Fiona Bullock, please?
Thank you, Moderator. Fiona Bullock, 490. My question is regarding section 4.8 of the report. The role of Director of Gender Justice of the Anglican Communion earlier this year was under threat when the staffing structure was reviewed. However, the Anglican Communion decided to reaffirm its commitment to gender justice. Mandy Marshall, who is the now Project Director for Gender Justice, is quoted as saying, "Sadly, the Church has been slow to address these issues. Female Christian survivors, including clergy wives, have often typically been ignored, sidelined or told to keep quiet for the sake of the ministry of the Church." And this was posted on the Anglican Communion website. Whilst I appreciate that there are many competing priorities for resources, I am dismayed that we no longer have a dedicated gender justice officer, especially in light of the fact that there has been a noted increase in violence against women during the pandemic. I'm concerned that this sends the wrong message about the Church's view on such issues. So, Convener, respectfully, may I ask how the Faith Impact Forum intends to show its continuing or even renewed commitment to working together towards gender justice? Thank you.
Again, thank you for the question. The Integrity Group is running and has under its umbrella the violence against women agenda and all gender-specific agendas as well. We have Mirella Yandoli, who is taking that forward for us, as well as being interfaith officer. It may not be ideal not to have a full-time post or a dedicated person. That's not within the call of the remit, the call of the Faith Impact Forum to do that. But you can be assured that the gender issues are still being carried forward. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Susan, are you
Yes,
in a position?
we have.
Yes, to answer, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you want to? Yes? Ian, please. Yep.
Alexander, and I've been delighted to be able to say 001. We had written to the Foreign Office and we got a letter from a civil servant rather than from the Minister replying that they were deeply concerned about the situation in Myanmar and that they were continuing to be participants within an international response and securing a response through the G7 statements in February, and that they were raising it in the Security Council. So that was the government response. The Embassy of Myanmar that we wrote to, you will remember that just after we wrote, the ambassador got thrown out of his own embassy because he wasn't in accord with the government in Rangoon, and so we have had no response from the embassy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Joanne White, one of the youth representatives. Joanne, please.
Joanne White, 764. My question is, will the Church of Scotland be supportive in the push of renewable energy techniques before it is too late? And will they be open to support international countries who may not have the resources as yet? And will they help with the demanding increase of the climate refugees around the world?
Thank you. Convener.
Thank you. Lots of stuff there. We want to be committed as a church to the renewable sector. And again, that's taken as a read, that's high on our agenda. Internationally, I'm not sure exactly how we could bring about helping those who are not in a position to be able to help themselves, although, prayer is a strong weapon, of course. But we also, with partner churches, are engaged in conversations around the climate agenda. We have with us at this assembly John Probidan from Bangladesh, and he was telling us yesterday about the cyclone that is hitting right now. It's hit West Bengal terribly. 800,000 people have been moved. It's about to hit the south of Bangladesh. These are issues that affect our partners, and our partners' stories tell us that we can't just sit back and do nothing. It is 21 years ago since a predecessor of John Probidan's from Bangladesh stood up at this assembly and encouraged us as a church to begin our journey towards caring for creation as a concerted effort, and we hope to continue to do that.
Thank you. We now come to deal with the fast tracking. On my screen, there are no requests to speak on 1, 2, 8, 10, 11, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Now, I'll just pause for a moment if anyone wishes to speak on any of these, if they would register a request to speak. I will therefore now go through the ones where there are still no requests to speak and declare them passed. That is sections 1, 2, 8, 10, 11, 12, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And I declare these sections passed. We now move to discussion and section 3, where there is an amendment from Mr. David Lang. David.
Good afternoon. Lang 530. My intention in putting forward this amendment is to be able to unite the Assembly behind the intent of the deliverance. Given the recent sale of oil and gas shares, which went against the most recent General Assembly vote to retain them, we need to be acceptant of the situation and move on. The wording that I am asking you to remove is inflammatory to those who voted to retain these shares. Oil and gas disinvestment is not mentioned in any of the youth reports, but climate change is. And so the changes would sit well with these reports. It is not necessary to quote oil and gas disinvestment as an example of young people's campaigning for us to convey the meaning of the deliverance and would aid unity if removed. I would urge acceptance of this amendment as a way of promoting unity.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. There was someone here a moment ago. Fraser Borland was down to speak against it. Yes, Fraser, please.
Thank you, Moderator. Fraser Borland, 749. I would urge the Assembly to resist Mr. Lane's amendment. I welcome the forum's deliverance and recognition of the hard work of young people in the Church of Scotland in their advocacy for divestment. And I would especially like to recognise those young people who have advocated at previous General Assemblies, but who are no longer youth representatives. I'd also like to add something to what Mr. Lane said, in which the National Youth Assembly has discussed and voted in previous years about divestment, and we're very much against it. So I'd urge him and other commissioners to look at previous supplementary reports of the National Youth Assembly. Mr. Lane's amendment seeks to recognise the values of voices, concerns and passions of young people in the Church of Scotland, which, while that is all nice and thoughtful, this deliverance and the associated report is not about young people. It's about divestment and the advocacy of young people about climate change. Any attention that is taken away from the horrible reality of climate change, treating it like a secondary issue, is undermining the real problem that our world is facing with fossil fuels. This issue needs to be dealt with now and not be kept on the back burner any longer. I do not think that any of the young people that advocate for awareness of climate change and fossil fuels would support this amendment, and it is clearly diminishing their hard work and the issue of climate change and divestment. The time to act has long been present. I do not think taking the emphasis away from climate change, as this amendment proposes, is going to solve any problems. So I strongly urge the Assembly to reject Mr. Lane's amendments and support the original Section 3 of Deliverance. And I'd also suggest that if Mr. Lane does want to recognise the value of the voices of young people in the Church of Scotland, he should move a new deliverance specific to that, possibly in the Faith Nurture Forum. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much, Fraser. I have no further requests to speak, so before I call the convener, does Mr. Lang wish to say anything in response?
I'd like to say it's no disrespect to young people. I'm talking about the reports that we submit to this General Assembly. I work with young people, and there is a variety of views, not just that we should disinvest from oil and gas, but we'll come to that later. That's it.
Thank you very much. Convener.
I'm perfectly happy, Moderator, to let the General Assembly make the decision. The reason for our including young people and their campaigning for disinvestment is because they were very vocal And we have talked repeatedly about listening to the voice of young people and repeatedly failed to do so. It seemed an opportunity for us to do just that.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to a vote on the amendment to section 3. The wording is on the screens. Principal Clerk, do you wish to read it out, just for clarification?
Yes, to amend section 3 of the Faith Impact Forum deliverance by deleting the words "who have campaigned for disinvestment from fossil fuels" and add at the end, including those about climate change.
Thank you. Will you press your buttons for or against, and voting is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 126. There voted against 364, so that amendment falls. I have, I think, one request to speak on section 3. And David Lang. David, do you want to speak again? A request to speak on section 3 in itself, yes. Unmute,
I'm fully
please.
behind communication and listening to young people. Very important, but it's also necessary to understand that people have a diverse set of views. Thank you.
Thank you. And also a contribution request to speak from Christopher Rowe. Christopher.
Moderator 271, Christopher Rowe. It's just really to note that my understanding of the report is that unfortunately the voice of our young people wasn't critical in deciding to disinvest. And I just want to express that sadness that it was purely an economic reality that meant that we disinvested from oil and gas rather than a principled decision.
Thank you. I have no further request to speak. Convener, do you wish to respond in any way?
Well, the idea of the principle comes up later in deliverances, and we're going to try and ensure that is followed through.
Therefore, let's move to a vote on section 3. Buttons for or against. Voting is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 434, against 27. So section 3 passes. We now move on to section 4. An amendment is being proposed by Miss Joanne White. Joanne, please.
Yes, I just thought I was saying that every single young person.
Joanne White, 764. I have made an amendment just to add at the end to make and to support congregations to sign the Scottish Church's COP26 pledge. Now, this can be found on the Eco Congregation Scotland site, and it's in regard to an urgent action to be taken in response to the climate crisis and for an increased use in the cleaner resources such as wind turbines and hydro. This is mainly to just get congregations and Kirk sessions to be aware of this, so people can sign and be aware of it. Thank you.
Bless you.
I think that, sorry, Joanne, had you concluded? Yeah, I think there's a slight glitch in the sound.
Yes, sorry, thank
so there was a
you.
bit of a glitch in the sound, that's why I just wasn't sure. Have we a seconder? Seconded. Any questions? There being no requests to speak, convener?
Happy.
Happy to accept.
Happy to accept, sir.
The convener is happy to accept. Nevertheless, we still have to proceed to a vote on amendment to section 4. Principal Clerk.
Moderator, I understand what we're doing is adding to the end of section 4 the words "and to support congregations to sign the Scottish Church's COP26 pledge."
Thank you. Voting is open for and against. Voting is closed. There voted for 423. There voted against 31. So that amendment passes. We now proceed to consider section 4 as amended. I don't have any request to speak on section 4 as amended. You have nothing to add, Convener? No. Therefore, we must proceed to a vote on section 4 as amended. Will you please press for or against now? Voting open. Voting closed. There are voted for 442. They have voted against 15. Therefore, section 4 as amended passes. We now move to section 5, to which there is an amendment in the name of Miss Iris Maxfield. Iris, can I ask you to propose your amendment?
Thank you, Moderator. Iris Maxfield 756, and thank you as well to the convener for their support in helping draft and help with this amendment. So my reasoning for this amendment is simply that while I commend the work of the Forum towards a more environmentally conscious church, I do not wish this work to end at the doors of our churches. Rather, with this amendment, I hope as we return to our congregations and work towards the net zero 2030 goals, we have discussions with our ecumenical partners and support them in their work also. As someone who spent this week in their mornings writing a dissertation about climate change to then come to this in the afternoons, I recognise how difficult conversations around climate change can be, but they're vitally important, particularly with people within our communities as well as with people who are like-minded as we believe them to be. So we cannot simply do our best for the environment and believe that our work is done. We must encourage others to do the same for the sake of our communities, for the sake of the people around the world who will be affected most by climate change that we may never meet, and for our planet as a whole. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. Seconder? Seconded. Any questions? Convener?
Happy to accept this, yes.
Thank you. The convener's indication of willingness to accept, but I must put it to the vote. The amendment to section 5.
Can I read it, Mother?
Sorry? Oh, do you want to read it? Yes.
Well, I feel I should read it.
Yeah.
Amend section 5 by adding at the end 3, urge congregations and presbyteries to join Eco Congregation Scotland and other ecumenical environment networks so that they may experience the benefits of expert advice and support, as well as the opportunity to join local and regional ecumenical networks to share information and ideas about how to reach net zero goals.
Thank you very much. Voting for and against is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 434. There voted against 29. I therefore declare that amendment is carried. And we now move to section 5 as amended, which I may have had one request to speak. Indeed, David Lang. David, please.
Hello, Lang 530. It wasn't really at this point I was going to speak. It was in pursuance of the additional section which I put forward.
I'll take that next, David. Thanks. Yep. Therefore, there being no speakers, convener, no. Therefore, must put section 5 as amended. Please press your buttons for or against. Voting open. Voting closed. They voted for 446, against 16. I therefore declare Section 5 as amended to be carried. And we will now come to David Lang. David, and you propose your new section.
Thank you very much. David Lang, 530. Right, in promoting tackling climate change, one thing that I felt that we could do is look at the changing the use of electricity for heating as being one of the options to churches when responding to climate change. However, the rates in place at present, which are 14.1 pence per kilowatt hour for weekend and evening, are not the best rates around. You can get 9 pence per kilowatt hour for electric car users, for example. A better rate would be an incentive for some churches to make the switch and an opportunity for the energy supplier to increase their market share. That would be a win-win situation and could be negotiated. A reduced rate would benefit all churches at this difficult time, and I would urge acceptance of this additional part of the deliverance.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Is there any questions to Mr. Lang? No. Last time I looked down, there was a request to speak on this. Yeah, I think there was a request from Raymond Young, the Chair of the General Trustees. Raymond, please. Raymond?
Moderator, if it helps, I was about to drop it in the General Trustees basket anyway, since it's more to do with, and they have already negotiated, and I think that's possibly what Raymond Young would say. They have already begun negotiations on a special rate for greener electricity, and we look forward to congregations making use of that, but also making use of greener gas when it comes on as well.
Thank you.
Moderator, the technical team are unable to find Raymond on the call. We wondered if he raised his Zoom hand, he would come to the top of the list and we may be able to find him that way. Otherwise, I'm afraid we can't locate him.
We'll just pause a moment to see if a Zoom hand is raised and our technical team will be able to identify him. No, I don't think, unless no hand has been raised. Convener, you've given an explanation. In these circumstances, can you perhaps take what position it is vis-à-vis this amendment?
We pass the buck to the General Trustees, who are able to negotiate. The Faith Impact Forum is in no position to do that. But I give the assurance that they are already tackling it. That is my understanding, and I would hope that that's true. And they already have begun negotiations, if not already achieved a negotiated position for cheaper electricity.
Thank you.
And the convener suggested it would be right if it was directed to him rather than to Faith Impact, to the General Trustees, sorry.
Yeah, I think, Moderator, we've had this tabled. It invites the Faith Nurture Forum to work with the General Trustees. I think that the Commissioner is perfectly entitled to ask you to work with the General Trustees, and I presume we just put this to a vote then.
Yes.
Thank you. I therefore ask you to express for or against the proposed new section. Please vote. Voting open. Voting closed. There voted for 399. There voted against 67. So that new section is added. Thank you. Thank you. We now come to section 6, where we have an amendment to be proposed by Mr. Lang. David.
David Ling, 530. I am a supporter of taking action with regards to climate change, and I have committed myself to doing various things. But the phrase "as a matter of principle" is not the one that sits well, given the perceived lack of principle applied when shares were sold. Protection of finances was quoted as the reason for the sale, yet we have statements in this deliverance which you would be forgiven for thinking would be the sole reason for the sale. This, is my view, is making political capital out of the situation and does nothing to bring those, the majority as was, on board with the thrust of the deliverance. To maximise making a positive improvement in the area of climate change, we should be pursuing the customers who burn hydrocarbon. That's the likes of you and I, and holding oil and gas companies to account. We need to ensure that these companies are making good progress in transitioning away from the supply of hydrocarbons for burning, so things like transport, gas boilers and the like, while still being able to supply oil for lubrication and as a feedstock for the pharmaceutical industry for the production of a range of medicines. Many companies are developing the technology required for the splitting of carbon from hydrogen contained in methane, and that's supporting supply of hydrogen, a clean fuel, and in carbon capture, all of which needs to be pursued to reduce the impact of climate change. Without being able to hold these companies to account at a shareholders' meeting, we have lost a significant lever. I am deeply concerned that in making the disposal in the way that we did, nothing has been achieved to make any difference to the release of greenhouse gases. Like Pilate, we have washed our hands of the situation, leaving it to others. What has been achieved is undermining the democratic principles of the Assembly, which is hardly a matter of principle. Removal of the phrase "as a matter of principle" would allow better support for the remainder of the deliverance without impacting its intent.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Seconded. Any questions to Mr. Ling? I don't have any requests to speak on this amendment, and therefore, convener.
Moderator, this wording was very carefully drafted with the Assembly trustees and with the Investors' Trust. I would be reluctant to see it changed. We continue our involvement with the investment companies to exercise some leverage, but we have to say that that leverage failed miserably while we were shareholders. We are no longer shareholders, and perhaps the message will be one that gets across. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now put this proposed amendment to a vote. Do you want to? I think it's fairly short.
Yes, it's quite short. It won't take me long. Amend section 6 by deleting the words "as a matter of principle."
Will you please press your buttons for or against, and voting is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 115. There have voted against 374. So that amendment does not pass. We will now move to deal with section 6 unamended. And I have a request to speak from Jennifer Adams. Jennifer.
Jenny Adams. Moderator, in section 2.5 of the report and its section 6 and 7 of this deliverance, the Forum hopes that the General Assembly will welcome and endorse the disinvestment of church funds from oil and gas companies as a matter of principle. And this Commissioner certainly wants to do that. I welcome and endorse that disinvestment and thank the Forum for their ongoing work in this area, which is one of many important aspects of working together for a just and green future. I hope that our own disinvestment will in fact strengthen our position in our ongoing engagement with governments and companies as we seek urgent action to tackle climate and ecological injustice. I also welcome and endorse the suggestion in the main report and appendix that investment can be used to generate beneficial social and environmental effects in addition to financial gains. I hope that will be a path the Investors' Trust will follow with our funds and a direction that will be explored by the proposed, in fact now agreed, Special Commission. I do hope we'll continue to use our voice and resources to support those working in the oil and gas industries, as many of my friends do, so that their skills are valued in a just transition to a net zero carbon economy. Amongst all these endorsements, I do note that the General Assembly is not yet committed to never investing in fossil fuels. A new report from the International Energy Agency, published just a week or so ago, has stated clearly that there can be no investment in new oil and gas fields if we are to limit global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees and globally reach net zero emissions by 2050. I trust the Faith Impact Forum will be listening to the best science and the voices of our partners in any future discussion of investments. And just in case anyone hopes this report means we've at least got our money sorted, there are still questions for any of us lucky enough to have a pension. Do you know where your pension is profiting from? Those of us in the Church's defined contribution pension scheme certainly need to consider that question, as a default fund with Legal and General is not intentionally ethical or fossil-free. Overall, this is an encouraging report. We're on the right track to play our part in the huge changes needed. But we still all have a lot to do as individuals, as a church, and through our governments. I hope we can rise to the challenges facing our world. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And I also have a request to speak from David Lang. David?
I don't have any further comment, thanks.
Thank you very much. Convener? Thank you. We'll now proceed to a vote on Section 6. Will you please press your buttons for or against? Voting open. Voting closed. There have voted for 452. There have voted against 22. So Section 6 passes. We will now proceed to Section 7 and an amendment being proposed by David Lang. David, do you propose your amendment?
Yes, it's the same old, I'm afraid. Removal of the identified phrase with the substitution of the word accept would allow all of us to support this part of the deliverance. The phrase to be removed does not, in my opinion, make any difference to the intent of the deliverance, but asks us to celebrate the removal of oil and gas company shares. There is nothing to celebrate in my view, but I understand that some see it differently. Please support this amendment so that we can all unite behind the intent of the deliverance rather than have a bit of discord. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Moderator, I wonder if Mr. Linga in fact said he wanted to use the word accept, and he's asked us to use the word agree. I just wanted to be sure that we know what we're trying to do here.
Grateful. David, could you perhaps clarify?
Agree is actually the word. It's just me typing out here what I was going to say. Got the wrong word, sorry.
So it's agree.
It's agree is your intent, yes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. That's clear. Thank you very much. Any questions? Was seconded did come up. Convener?
I would say that when we welcome, we are not celebrating. We are welcoming. And we recognise that this is going to hurt communities who are heavily involved in the oil and gas industry. We know that. This is not a celebration, it is a welcome of a stance that we need to take, as would be our stance on nuclear weapons, where we don't hold back on having a chaplain go in a nuclear submarine. We make sure that the chaplain stands with those who are living the nuclear experience. We're not proposing that we pull out of communities or become disinterested in people because of this is about a principle, and we feel strongly that we need to take this stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to vote on the amendment to section 7. Will you please press your buttons for or against? Voting is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 125. There voted against 355. So that amendment is not passed. We will now proceed to the substantive section 7, where I do have some indications to speak. David, do you want to say anything further? You're on a list of speaking on section 7. Call you. Yep.
Yes, well, disappointed that my amendment wasn't accepted. I'd like us all to unite round about what needs to happen next. So that's really all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. And I've got a question from Joanne White. Joanne?
Joanne White, 764. So with the success of divestment and the funding of oil and gas companies, is it guaranteed and certain that more investment is going to be put towards renewable sources? And will this continue to happen within the foreseeable future?
Susan?
Our hope is always to go for renewables over anything else. And so we will pursue that as best we can.
Thank you very much. I have no other further requests on this section. I'll therefore move to a vote on section 7 as it stands. Will you press your buttons for or against? Voting open. Voting closed. There have voted for 434. There have voted against 33. So section 7 passes. Section 8 has been passed fast track. We now come to section 9. And I have some requests to speak. Request to speak here. If anyone else wishes to speak on this section, please indicate. And I'm delighted to welcome Joel Haffenstein. I hope, Joel, I've got your pronunciation of your name correct, but you're very welcome. We're delighted that you're joining us as one of our overseas delegates, and we'll ask you to speak, please.
Thank you, Moderator. 688, Joel Haffenstein, the mission partner with United Mission to Nepal. Last week, I wrote in an article for Life and Work magazine, a coronavirus diary, that COVID had just cost the Nepali church one of its pillars. Dr. Robert Kartak was raised in a Nepali-speaking Christian community in India, one with historic links to the Church of Scotland. He was called to Nepal as a pastor at a time when the Christian population was limited to just a few families. He led one of the earliest churches and saw the Christian population grow to somewhere between 1 and 3 million today. He'd been a friend to our mission for 65 years. And last week he died in Nepal's second wave of COVID, and was followed 3 days later by his son, the Reverend Samuel Kartak. The heartbreak that Nepal's Christian community is experiencing is only one small part of Nepal's overall loss in this wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Every day, thousands more people are testing positive and hundreds are dying, including far more young people than died of this disease in 2020. Hospitals around Nepal, including our own 2 mission hospitals, struggle to produce enough oxygen for the much greater needs of people in this wave. And all over Nepal, people are struggling through their final breaths today, unable to reach a hospital that will provide the oxygen to keep them alive. We see from the experience of other countries that this wave will subside, but we know it's likely to be followed by new waves for years to come, killing many thousands each time unless Nepal is able to vaccinate most of its population at the earliest possible juncture. At present, other countries have canceled their promises to provide us with vaccines, with perhaps only 3 to 4% of our population thus far vaccinated, and many only having received 1 of the necessary 2 doses. So I'm speaking in fervent support of this 9th motion that we urge the UK government to do all that it can to ensure COVID-19 vaccines are available around the world, and to ask that there be real urgency in our urging, and an honest reckoning with the fact that the UK government will not easily be persuaded to amend a policy of, as it sees it, successful vaccine nationalism, which has ensured the UK has a vaccine supply adequate for its whole population for some years to come, whilst other nations don't have a supply adequate even to their elderly or chronically ill citizens. I'd ask the Church to join our friends at Christian Aid, Oxfam, and others in the People's Vaccine Campaign and urge the governments of the world, and especially our own in the UK, to ensure that we're serious about stepping up both distribution and production of vaccines around the world, including the wider sharing of patented vaccine information and a release of 20% of stockpiled vaccines from countries like the UK that have more than they presently need. These obviously are not policies that Western governments will be eager to accept. They don't expect political rewards from populations scarred by the traumas of the past year, and we understand that. But with our commitment to global justice and our unwillingness to see the global poor bearing the majority of the burdens of COVID-19, we must make this a priority for our committed advocacy, and we must do so with great urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. I did say when I welcomed international delegates on Saturday that I hoped you would make contributions to our debates, because I think it's important that we do get a perspective from beyond our shores. So thank you very much for your contribution. Convener.
Eloquent. Thank you.
I must now put no other request section 9 to a vote. All those press your buttons for and against. Voting open. Voting closed. There have voted for 481 and no one against. Therefore, section 9 is carried. Sections 10, 11 and 12 have been fast-tracked. We now come to section 13, where there is an amendment in the name of the Reverend David McLaughlin. David, please.
Thank you, Moderator. David McLaughlin, 266. There's always a wee bit of a debate when putting the deliverances together as to what words we introduce a deliverance with. In other words, are we going to instruct or invite, or are we going to urge, or are we going to call? And I'm very happy about the general point we made in this deliverance number 13. But I do think we could maybe be clearer and perhaps stronger in voicing our opposition to what's happening. Calling the government to provide the 0.7 of overseas aid is good. It's almost something we could say in any year. It certainly is something we could say if we thought the government was going to be reviewing it or changing it. But the government isn't actually thinking about this. It's now actually doing it. It's decided to slash by up to 80% many of the aid programmes, including programmes to provide clean water and sanitation in some of the most deprived countries of the world. This is absolutely shocking. It's scandalous. And I think we need to say so. I think we need to say so clearly. If we as church are not prepared to be leading the charge in standing up for some of the poorest people in the world, and to make the case that the richest countries have a moral responsibility to be supporting those in the developing world, then we're not really doing our duty. So I propose amending the section, but adding this beginning to it.
Thank you very much. I note that it is seconded. Is there any questions to David? There being no questions, and I have no other request to speak, can I therefore ask the convener to respond, please?
Happy to deplore.
The convener has indicated a willingness to support, but still, nevertheless, we still have to put it to a vote. But can I ask people to press the buttons for and against? Voting open. Voting closed. Those voted for 438. That is voted against 39. So that amendment is carried. We now move to section 13 as amended with that amendment at the start. And the text is on the screens. Vote on section 13 as amended. Will you please vote for or against? Voting open. Voting closed. They voted for 458 and against 18. I therefore declare that section 13 as amended is passed. Section 14 was fast-tracked. We now come to section 15. And I call the people, if you wish to request to speak. And can I call Fiona Smith, please? Fiona.
583, Fiona Smith. Thank you, moderator. I was very thankful to Mike Goss and to Pauline Steinberg for speaking earlier and for the comments by the convener. I just wanted to highlight again the importance of what this section of the deliverance is referring to. In the last 18 months, within my own pastoral context, I have been overwhelmed by the amount of work that I have been involved with in relation to domestic abuse and violence, coercive and controlling behaviour against women. I cannot stress enough, and obviously a lot of the work I do is very confidential. I know the domestic violence unit in Inverness. I'm on first name terms with DIs. I'm also on first name terms with the Women's Aid Refuge and many of the support workers. This is not just about, domestic abuse is not just about violence. There are so many different areas to it. And as a former lawyer, I have been astonished and appalled at how difficult, despite the progressive legislation that this country has in relation to criminal behaviour and coercive and controlling behaviour, but you try and prove that. We need to equip ourselves better in the church. We need to be aware of what is actually going on behind the closed doors in our congregations and in our communities. And I also want to refer to the main part of the report, which also speaks about spiritual abuse. We've got to start opening conversations about that too. Furthermore, on the issue of women, we as a congregation, we as the denomination have been ordaining women into the leadership of eldership and ministry for over half a century. But I can speak from personal experience, and I know of many other colleagues in the leadership of this church, that as women, we are still finding it difficult to have our voices, to be recognised in all places, and to be respected for our place at the table. Be under no illusions, my friends. This is a serious issue for us all and for the people that we serve in Scotland. So I totally agree with the convener and the other comments earlier. We cannot have any more instructions. This is an urge. because it was very wise of Susan earlier. But I just really do, and I've spoken with Susan, who's done this course, and it is, and I don't know how I'm going to find the time, but we are. So I just want to add my voice to this and thank the forum very much for highlighting this extremely pertinent and serious issue. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Fiona. Can I call, please, Barry Hughes?
Thank you, moderator. Barry Hughes, 393. Can I thank Fiona Smith for what she just said, and also Mike Goss on behalf of Pauline for what he said earlier on as well. I'll declare a personal interest because I'm a member of the integrity group that's put the material together, so obviously I'm going to recommend it. Just a very small point, but actually I think quite an important point. The acronym which is often used now in this area is not just violence against women, but VAWG, violence against women and girls. And I think it's just important to point out that the material which has been developed covers a lot of the violence against women sort of issues that Fiona has just talked about, and which many of us within our parishes will be far too aware of. But it does also include violence against girls, sadly, of all ages across our society, even sometimes within our churches as well. So I just want to make sure that everybody realises the scope of this training, which of course I urge, to use that word, everybody to participate in, covers not just violence against women, but right across the spectrum, including girls as well. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Barry. And can I call now Julie Rennick? Please, Julie.
Thank you, moderator. Julie Rennick, 373. I kind of feel I'm repeating what has gone before, but I also think it's really important. The first thing I want to say is I feel it's regrettable that the restructuring removed the post of the Gender Justice Officer, which may dilute the necessary focus on issues of gender and justice in our church. It's encouraging to note that the task group, now renamed Integrity, has continued this really important, vital work. For, to quote your predecessor, moderator, we have work to do. Violence against women and girls has only increased during lockdown. While women and girls live in fear, we have work to do. Moderator, convener, the emphasis is vital. We must work together. We all have work to do. Can we, the gathered representatives, commit wholeheartedly, or do we need to be told? I wonder if this remit should be not turned into an instruction, but expanded slightly so that we urge not just our Kirk sessions, but our congregations to engage with this material. Because wherever we are, whether we know it or not, there are women and girls who are subject to abuses. We need to be aware. We need to be equipped to help, to support, and to come alongside all who are impacted by this very important area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie. And can I now please call Stuart Cutler? Stuart.
Cutler, 319. It's a question for the convener. One, obviously, the vast majority of violence against women and girls is perpetrated by men. And I would want to ask how we as a church can address that issue and not just the vital work of supporting girls and women who have been victims of violence, but to end violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Stuart. And may I now invite Sheena Orr, please. Sheena?
Moderator, Sheena Orr, 021. It's just to speak in favour of the motion. As a chaplain, we come across many people who have been affected by domestic violence. And often it is that violence that has traumatised them that through time actually leads to drug abuse or taking alcohol, which leads to them ending up in prison. And so we see the end of that process. And I'd like to say as well, not wanting to dilute this section anyway at all, but we also see men who've been affected by the violence of women. So this is something that I really think that congregations should be thinking about and being trained in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheena. Susan, do you wish to respond?
Indeed, Mr. Cutler asked about the wider issue of educating congregations. I think that is absolutely crucial. You know, it takes a whole community to bring up a child. Our whole community needs to be aware of these issues in order that the way we bring up children is one that means violence against women is just not on and not acceptable under any circumstances. I too regret the loss of a designated staff member on gender issues, but I want to assure the Assembly that all of the staff of Faith Impact Forum are committed to gender issues and to making sure that they take them on board when it comes to the work that they do. So every area of the work of the Faith Impact Forum is done with an awareness of the gender issues.
Thank you very much. And we must now move to a vote on section 15. Will you please press your buttons for or against? Voting is open. Voting is closed. There voted for 471 and there voted against 7. So section 15 is overwhelmingly passed. We now move to section 16. And can I invite Sandy Horsburgh, please, Sandy.
Sandy Horsburgh, 711, convener of the Ecumenical Relations Committee. Moderator, very briefly to support Deliverance 16 and assure the Assembly that the Ecumenical Relations Committee will be very happy to work with the Faith Impact Forum on these matters. Public affairs is an area of the Church's life which is immeasurably strengthened by cooperation between churches. As Susan already said, discussions between relevant staff in the forum and in our committee on engagement with the Church of England have already been quite extensive. In closing, I should also point out that the St Andrew Declaration agreed on Monday and soon to go before the Scottish Episcopal Church General Synod commits our two churches to work together in these areas in very similar terms too. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, please, the Very Reverend Russell Barr. Russell.
Moderator Russell Barr, number 2. Following on from what Sandy Horsburgh has been saying, and as I'm sure my earlier question indicated, I was very encouraged by the ecumenical dimension to the Faith Impact report, indeed an ecumenical dimension that's run through many of the reports to our General Assembly. In discussion with Church of England colleagues, we are very aware in the contact group that we share many of the same opportunities and many of the same challenges around the COVID pandemic, around issues of buildings, recruitment, engagement with people under 40s. I was very encouraged to hear the convener say how already Faith Impact and the Church of England have been in discussion on questions of immigration and international aid. These are matters which take us to the heart of the life of our nation and to the heart of the life of our church, our understanding of our faith, our understanding of the justice that God expects of us, our commitment not to walk past on the other side of human need. Let me assure the convener, let me assure the Assembly that in my role as co-chair of the contact group, the Columba group with the Church of England, I will work as best I can to support the dialogue with our friends and colleagues in the CAB.
Thank you, Russell. Susan, do you wish to say anything? No.
Nope,
Thank you very much. We must now proceed to a vote on section 16. Buttons for or against, voting open. Voting closed. There have voted for 466 and voted against 6. I therefore declare that section overwhelmingly carried. The remaining sections of the deliverance have already been fast-tracked. They must put the deliverance as a whole as amended to the Assembly. Is it the will of the Assembly? Thank you very much. And thank you, Susan. We thank you and your colleagues in the Faith Impact Forum for all the work you do over a whole range of issues that probably never seem to stop coming. And I've enjoyed my engagement with you, in the run-up to the Assembly, and I look forward to engaging with you and your colleagues in the Faith Impact Forum during my year of office. So thank you very much.
Moderator.